Today's chat is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/FFC. With over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player, this is a great alternative for keeping up with the monthly Focus Fire Book Club.
Welcome to Focus Fire Chat. Explore together.
Welcome back for the 20th installment of our Extra Lore series, recorded live on November 1st, 2017, over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat. Big shout out to our live chat here. Thank you so much for spending your evening with us. Our topic for this chat is going to be an introductory, emphasis on the introductory, look at the Marvel Universe. So we're rounding out the comic books and the games and the cinematics and all that fun nonsense. This is your host, Blue Crew 86. Alongside me, we have our resident Gunter extraordinaire, Green-Eyed Music Lover. Green, have any thoughts on the topic tonight?
Cinematic Universe, Final Fantasy, or not Final Fantasy. See, Beard, you did it to me. You put it in my head.
Yes!
Fantastic Four is what I was going to mention. There's a lot of good things about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and then there's some bad things, Fantastic Four, that could just kind of go and need to be reworked and redone, and a lot of thoughts. Yeah.
Well, after that, we have our crazy grizzled lore fiend over here. You heard him laughing just a second ago. Beard Grizzly. Beard, how about you? You got any thoughts on tonight's topic?
Well, I've been a Marvel fan for a pretty long time, but I haven't kept up with it as much as I would like to. I'm excited to kind of hear it from a person, and otherwise from chat too, that has a little bit more background with it. But it's definitely one of those things that I haven't followed through my childhood quite as much as I thought I was going to, which is kind of weird.
All right, and then, of course, for these topics, we always want to make sure that we have someone who is well-versed in the lore, and with a topic as broad as this one, we just went ahead and doubled down on it. So first up, we have DJ Kantrip. DJ, how is everything going for you tonight?
It's going good.
And then can you let us know real quick where people can find you, and then also just kind of what got you into Marvel?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at DJ_Kantrip. Also on Mixcloud, which is a DJ mix site, which is mixcloud.com/Kantrip, Kantrip. And what got me into Marvel was largely Marvel's always been more of the comic publisher I've preferred. I remember in I think 4th grade, someone handed me a copy of West Coast Avengers, and I just loved it. And then later on, I bought my first copy of Rocket Raccoon, and I just got sucked in from there. So it's always been one of my preferred. It's been my preferred publisher because of the way they handle their characters and the fact that they do try to mirror modern society a little better than other publishers do.
Yeah. And then last but definitely not least, I want to welcome back one of our community managers and a returning guest co-host, Damoel. Damo, how's everything going for you tonight?
Fantastic.
Can you let us know where people can find you and what got you into Marvel?
You can find me at Damoel, Damoel, on Twitter and on the Focused Fire Discord. I think the first comic I read from Marvel was Darkhawk, which most people won't have even heard of. And I really loved it. I just adored it. And then from there I got into the X-Men, and I really loved the sort of social play of the mutants versus humans versus antagonistic mutants. So that was pretty much where I got into it. Cool. I still love that stuff an awful lot.
Awesome.
Fun fact.
Oh no, here we go.
Okay, fun fact. When I was in high school, I was a homecoming queen candidate for football, and they asked us if we could be any superhero, what would we pick? And I picked Rogue from X-Men versus the other girls who picked, like, Buttercup from Powerpuff Girls, and I think two of them picked Powerpuff Girls and one of them picked something totally different, like Sailor Moon. So it's like, you guys don't understand the question. It's fine.
Rogue is a damn fine choice.
Yes.
Rogue is a very, very fine choice. Very fine choice.
She's always been one of my favorites.
Let's run through our housekeeping notes real quick, and then we'll jump right into the conversation. Before we start off the chat, however, I do have a few housekeeping notes. In our last Extra Lore episode, we discussed the DC series. If you ever miss an episode and would like to catch up, please be sure to check out the new FocusFireChat.com for archives, articles, and links to the other aspects of Focus Fire Chat. If you don't mind, please give us some feedback on iTunes to let us know how we're doing, as well as helping us continue to grow. As many of you already know, Focus Fire Chat is a cross-community gathering where the intent is to offer a week-long, in-depth view of a particular subject from within the lore of Destiny and other games. With the Extra Lore series, we delve into a game series other than Destiny for a full month, giving the group a chance to get a feel for the other games that our community is loving to play. We try to stream a recap of this month-long conversation on the first Wednesday of each month. Please be sure to also give some support to the other podcasts in the Guardian Radio Network, links of which can be found in our show notes or on our website. These include podcasts focused on Destiny, Guardian Radio, the first and longest running Destiny podcast on the net, Guardian 1, a Destiny group dedicated to Guardians helping Guardians and discussing current Destiny news and happenings, Ghost and Echoes, a collection of the Destiny audio grimoire from Destiny 1, and the network's newest edition, The Guardian Life, which is a podcast for the casual Guardian's perspective and highlighting all Guardians, large and small. We also actually have some non-Destiny focused podcasts as well. Those are Paragon Radio, a podcast that focuses on the news and events in Epic Games, MOBA, Paragon, and their community, and The Enthusiast Life, a podcast discussing a wide range of fun topics from the entertainment world. Our next Extra Lore is going to be a discussion on the lore of Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice. Be sure to jump into the Discord and weigh in on that one. With that, DJ, where do you think is the best place to start when looking for a really basic understanding of the Marvel Universe?
New York City, Manhattan. Honestly, that's a good starting
that's a fair point,
because
It is a good point.
it's honestly a joke that even gets brought up in several of the comics. Like so many people go to LA, and people be like, "Why did you come out here?" They'll be like, "There are plenty of heroes in New York. They will be fine." Or the fact that there's actually a comic running for the longest time called Damage Control, which people have been hoping would get made into a show, which was a series about the insurance company that insures buildings and residences for superhero things. So, and it was all based in New York. So yeah, New York is probably the best place to start for Marvel U.
I'm gonna go find that comic book now.
It's pretty
sounds
great.
freaking hilarious. Well, and also, I know we kind of started with DC. We kind of started with the breaking the fourth wall and kind of stepping back and looking at the history of Marvel just a little bit, history of DC. Do we want to do that with Marvel to kind of give us an idea of where they as a company are coming from when we start talking about some of these? Like we're probably going to just touch on really the big figures within the universe.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think that do you think that, I know with DC it was kind of some of the flavors of heroes and villains were definitely inspired, especially by the time that they were, introduced, and we'll kind of talk about that as well. But do you think the history of the company in and of itself, do you think that had a significant impact? Obviously it had some impact on the characters, but do you think it had any significant impact?
I think the history had impact on it to a certain degree, because you once more, like with DC, within Marvel, you have Jack Kirby as a very central character. a very central creator, a very powerful creative presence within there. And there's always been a little bit of controversy regarding copyright laws, who created what character, who should own the rights to this. And that especially gets even stickier now, now that Jack Kirby has passed on, bless him. And I mean, I will on a daily basis read some of the really deep industry comic sites, and yeah, there's still a lot of legal stuff kicking around. But for Marvel, largely, no. The publishing history of it, like, there's a couple basic notes that were in here that is good for like an origin place, but I don't think it drastically impacted the way, say, DC and Charleston had splits early on.
Okay. Because and as far as the basic notes, what I had just thrown into the show notes, the history of Marvel, real quick, it was founded in around 1939, originally as Timely Comics, and then it took the name Atlas Comics at around 1950, and then actually the name Marvel was actually brought into play around 1961, and then obviously there's depending on how far down that particular rabbit hole you go, there's some pretty splits around the naming, because I guess Marvel Entertainment is not necessarily Marvel. It's a subsidiary of Marvel insofar as like Marvel Entertainment is, because there's now that's even more splintered, because there's the cinematic universe versus the comic book universe versus the game, like the video game universe. Like all of them kind of have separate but equal story arcs, but they're all kind of separate in separate like universes. Like, do they take the cinematic universe and the comic book universe and allow for crossover between those? Because they do have the multiverse model.
No, because largely, much like with what's happening with DC and their CW TV shows, you see a lot of like the changes or the presentation of the characters in the movie. And this isn't just recent to the MCU. This goes as far back as like with the first X-Men movie that Fox put out. There is this rather unfortunate trend of, hey, this movie's coming out. Oh, we have to suddenly status reset or do a status quo reset in the comics or alter this particular thing, because they have this hope that the movie will bring people in to read the comic. That never happens, sadly. People get interested, but then they see the books on the shelves, and they just never make that leap. But it's the cinematic universe. The cinematic universe doesn't really have a play within the Marvel comics themselves.
Okay, because I know that kind of plays into the conversation we had a little bit earlier about the Guardians of the Galaxy and like the different iterations of their team. But so I was just curious about that. I did note that one of the things that the Marvel universe does that I really like, and I don't know if DC, I'm assuming DC has one of these as well, but they have something called the Official Handbook of the Marvel Universe, which is kind of like I don't even know, like an encyclopedia basically of everything that's going on.
It's the best way. Yeah, it's the best way to explain it. I've got it sitting somewhere.
Oh my gosh, it was so cool. Like, I was actually reading like the history of that, how that came about. And it says in 1982 they had this. There was their first miniseries, and it was called The Contest of Champions. And I don't remember exactly like the whole. I actually wasn't really reading to know the story arc. I was actually just kind of reading behind the scenes, like the idea of what it was. And it actually was meant to kind of bring all the characters in the universe together and kind of throw them and see how they worked and all that. And that was actually that's actually considered by a lot of people to be the precursor of what is now known as the Official Handbook of the Marvel Universe. So I was like, that was kind of an interesting thing. And then my other final note is similar to DC, Marvel does have a kind of a parallel universe thing going on. And Marvel kind of unequivocally bases the majority of everything in Earth Prime, or as some in the Marvel universe call it, Earth 616. What's the importance of 616 is my question. Like,
It's random.
Okay, it is random. It is a random.
It's
not
random. It's Alan Moore once more wreaking havoc in the comic book community, because we all love that crazy old wizard. No, it was just an offhand, like, he just mentioned it. He used to write, because Marvel had two separate branches for a period of time. They had the UK branch, where they published a Doctor Who comic on top of like some other titles like Death's Head, Captain Britain, etc. And in there, since Captain Britain is a rather multi-dimensional type character, they mentioned that the Captain Britain for our universe comes from 616, Earth 616. And it just kind of traveled and just proliferated.
It just stuck.
And so no one would have ever suspected that Earth 616 came from like this book that no one in America really would have read unless you were a really hardcore Captain Britain fan. But yeah, that's where it came from.
Well, all right. I was like, I've always heard Earth 616, and it's just been one of those things where it's like, I have no idea where this is coming from, but okay.
Random muttering from Grumpy Dumbledore. That's all what it was.
Okay, cool. Well, do you wanna just dive into some of the big figures?
Yeah, let's do it.
The nice thing, and Damo, I think this was actually something we had made a comment on the DC one, was like, DC had some really, really interesting. I'm going to say it wrong because I flipped it in my head. What it was? God, man, I went completely blank on where I was going with.
DC tends to focus on very core, non-complicated heroes, and then adds a lot of the complication through their villains.
Right.
And Marvel kind of tends to do the opposite.
Right.
A lot of their villains are very easy to understand what they're trying to do, right? Thanos, Galactus, most of the Spider-Man, they're not super complicated characters. They might have complicated motivations, but their heroes tend to be very, very complicated. Tony Stark, again, Spider-Man, Jessica Jones is a great example there.
Oh, Jessica Jones.
Truth.
So that's kind of an interesting dichotomy, I think.
Well, and Marvel also tends to be not so rigid on the definition of hero. They have a lot of like, they have a lot. I mean, the one that comes to mind is Punisher and Deadpool, right, which are air quotes, air quotes here, honestly, superhero.
Like, honestly,
Wolverine for a long period of time. For a long period of time, yeah.
I'll just go full controversial and say Magneto, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, well, Magneto was right. Yeah. Magneto was right. Sorry.
Like you want to talk about complicated as to whether they're a hero or whether that description applies. That's the man right there. My single favorite character in the entire Marvel universe.
I mean, even we were talking.
Go Brotherhood.
Go Brotherhood. we were talking about this a little bit before the show, but like the Fantastic Four, right? The Fantastic Four were, I think arguably they are one of the original groupings, right?
Not arguably, yeah.
Yeah, they are. They are Marvel's first family, officially. Yeah. They are Marvel's first family.
And it's a very important distinction, that family bit, because it's key to understanding that particular story and title, I think.
Oh, I was thinking of Avengers being the remake of the All-Winter Squad. Yeah, okay. So Fantastic Four was in 1961. And then but their main big bad, Mr. Baron Von Doom, all right.
He's gotten a lot more complicated over the years.
Well,
too.
No, right,
but now he's
freaking Iron Man now.
Yeah.
But that's what we were talking about a little bit before the show started up. It was like, Doom is kind of trying to redeem himself, but not really, but he is, and he like kind of bounces back and forth. And then, even within that group, and this again, Damo, I know kind of goes back to what you're saying, there is the main figure of that group, Mr. Fantastic. Okay, so back up real quick. Fantastic Four, you got obviously four individuals, Mr. Fantastic, the Human Stretch thing, Invisible Woman, Human Torch, and the Thing. Okay, so those are the 4 main figures of the Fantastic Four, and their title villain. I'm trying to remember if there was anything other than Doom. I mean,
Mole Man.
I know who was it?
Mole Man.
Oh, Mole Man. Okay.
Mole Man, yeah, it was one of their first.
Wasn't Namor technically, or did Namor was Namor more of the ally?
Namor was more of a frenemy.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
right, because he
Facebook
wanted,
status complicated.
Yeah, he wanted Sue. That's right. I forgot about that. Yeah. Okay.
Especially in the early stuff, everyone wanted Sue.
We're not gonna.
I'm not.
Anyways.
I'm not kidding. Like that's
No,
just like a
Complicated
plot line.
families.
Like that's
Family
just
drama.
part of the story. Yeah.
It is. It is
Um,
legitimately part, unfortunately.
But I mean, and that ties into what you were saying earlier, Demo, is about the complicated heroes. I mean, you had this Fantastic Four, this group of people who have, I mean, given the depending on which iteration you're looking at, you have either they're all like most of them are family, none of them are family, whatever. And then the Thing, the whole situation with him, the tension between all that group and what happened and all this stuff. And then you have their villain, who is a guy who wears a metal mask and wants to take over a small country. Like,
Well, he owns the small country.
well,
He's
he
supposed
owns
to
it. He wants
take
yeah,
over the world.
right. But I mean, like he's like, it's like you have like this like nest of like things going on, and then over here in the villain, you're just like, yeah, I'm going to take over the world. I was like, I remember when I first read it, I was like, there has got to be something else going on with it. No, there wasn't. It was just
One
like he
thing
was
that
just
I
like,
find really interesting about the Fantastic Four is that a lot of what makes them story worthy and what makes them click is actually that they're like the drama is a huge part of
right.
Mhm.
their storytelling, right? Like a lot of Fantastic Four stories don't follow the more standard like kind of hero's journey. A lot of it's like them, kind of infighting and wrestling with each other and their sort of personal feelings, and then eventually like kind of getting past that crap and actually whomping the villain.
Right.
And one thing I want to mention before we go too far is that the Sue thing's actually kind of interesting to me, because my theory is that one of the reasons why she was written that way is like if you look at early Marvel, she's one of the only sort of socially acceptable female characters.
Mhm.
Because
I can see
outside
that.
of her, like the Avengers didn't have anybody for a while, if I remember.
No,
correctly.
Wasp. They had Wasp. Wasp was founding member.
Right. Okay. So Wasp was another one too, but I think didn't she have that problem with everybody wanting Wasp too?
Yes.
She was married. No, she was married to
Ant-Man.
Hank Pym off the bat. So we
So
can't have
that's
people.
fair.
But
So
then
yeah,
let's-
so
Yeah.
back to the
Yeah.
socially
Yeah.
acceptable thing.
yeah,
and
but you
then,
want to talk
like-
about drama on that one.
And then eventually, no, well, we're not mentioning the
Yeah.
Ultimates line here. No,
No.
it's not happening.
Nope.
But then, like a lot of the early female characters were mutants, which were sort of directly written as not necessarily socially acceptable.
Right. Well, and that was
Mhm.
That's
X-Men.
the whole plot line,
Right,
is
right.
whether
Oh,
these people
God.
are acceptable.
Oh my God. Yeah, the whole Jean Grey thing. Ugh.
I mean, another everybody wants.
Mhm.
Well, and the whole thing with X-Men wasn't that Lee basically being, because didn't he create X-Men because he wanted to have a group of people who had powers that he didn't have to explain, like that were like basically he
I've always heard that a lot of it was they specifically wanted that sort of social commentary of a. 'cause, I mean,
Civil
that's been
rights.
yeah, basically yeah. I was
specifically
trying to
civil
avoid.
rights.
I was dancing, but yeah, basically
Yeah.
they wanted a comic that was the civil rights thing, and I mean,
Right.
at its best, when it's doing well, in my opinion, that is what.
Oh
X-Men
yeah,
discovered.
I mean,
When it's doing well,
speaking of Brotherhood of Mutants, that was, I mean, Magneto's big issue with everything
Yeah.
was the way that he viewed, and I mean, getting into a bit of the
Magneto did
villains
nothing
there.
wrong.
Yeah, getting in. Okay, well, let's. So getting into that arc, though, I mean, Magneto, and again, this is kind of where Marvel actually does give a bit of complexity to an arc, a villain, at least an initial figure that was presented as a villain, because Magneto, it turns out later, I think later in the series, he wasn't originally introduced with the backstory of the
It was very early, though.
It was very early. Yeah,
Was it
fairly early?
Because
I don't know if it was initial or not, but it was very, very early. If not, like that was intended to be a big part of his.
Okay, because I mean that to me, when I was introduced to him, I was like, that makes perfect sense. His entire worldview, was shaped by this event.
And I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of disagree that he was initially introduced as a villain. I think there are some times where he was a villain early on, but I think that very clearly they intended him to be a complicated character that you couldn't just put into a box.
Right. Which I can also see the case of, I mean, again, with the X-Men, the entire X-Men world it's been heavily about social issues and all
arguably
that.
At its core, it is the most muddied of the comic universes I've read, and I put that up against some really dark stuff too.
It was past 10 years has been really hard to read for the X-Men. I'm not saying that because of bad writing and bad creative directions, but because of, we'll probably get into it a little later, but there was a very specific event that occurred within the Marvel Universe that drastically reshaped the world for the mutants within the Marvel Universe, and it made everything very dark just by the nature of what it was. And when you hand any creative team that, like, oh, do what you want with these guys, but remember, this happened.
Yeah. I actually haven't read a lot of X-Men since that happened because I'm not a particularly big fan of the twist and the way it's gone, but that's personal choice.
So,
I think it's bad.
But X-Men is a weird one.
Yeah, I would argue that you can't really. There are very few people in there that you can point to as just plain villain.
No, Magneto's been a hero. Magneto has been a hero. He's related to school.
This world exists because Magneto exists. Like in the X-Men universe, right? Like he has saved it, arguably more than some of the heroes have.
Oh, you mean Professor X isn't a hero?
He is, but he's
brainwashing.
Yeah, but one of the great things about Charles. Yeah. One of the great things about Charles is also that he's such an idealist that sometimes arguably can twist him around almost to the villainhood, right? Like sometimes
he's the living proof of letting the right thing lead you down the wrong path.
Yeah, which is, one of my favorite X-Men, and I'm going to get some flack here, I'm sure, is Cyclops, because when he's written well, he's very much a part of that story, right? Cyclops' struggle with where he belongs in the mutant universe is intrinsically tied into the two people that he sort of respects most in the universe being so far to either edge that he's often very confused. And I will definitely caveat that I like it. Cyclops when he's well written and not when he's a complete doof. Which does happen.
You kind of just summed up You kind of just summed up my experience with the 90s cartoon at the very least. I was like, some of the episodes I loved of Cyclops, and then others I was like, what is this?
Yeah, what even is this character? What is the point of this guy? Like, is he just supposed to be comic relief, but he sort of knows it? Like, what's that's a great series, but yeah, it's got some ups and downs.
Even as a 6-year-old, I was sitting there watching it going, why is he so angsty so much? What is going on here?
Why is he so angsty?
Like, does he not know how to relax? Jeez.
Yeah, really.
Well, so
it's like, look, I get you're angry because you shoot a red beam, but
constantly seeing red. That's all he sees.
Yeah, but basically. Do you have like Red Bull syndrome here or something?
Literally, that's all he can see because those glasses make everything red.
Yeah. That's 6-year-old me, by the way. Just when I do this voice, you understand? Okay.
Oh God.
Well, and you want to talk about another group that has a bit of complexities and has changed quite a bit as well as the Avengers. When they were I think Avengers.
I want to quote one X-Men commented. Another thing that makes Scott great is his interactions with one of my favorite actual villains, I will say, which is Mr. Sinister. When he's written well.
Yeah.
We'll get back to him when we get to the X-Men. But yeah, the Avengers are definitely, Civil War. Cough, cough.
Well, the thing is,
let's say Civil War at its core, maybe not the execution, but like that is a very good. That is a very like at its core and what it was supposed to mean. It's a very good window into the Avengers universe, so to speak. What makes them tick and,
I can see
what they struggle with.
It was, and it was also a really great way for Marvel to kind of. I don't think they intended for it to happen based off several of their Avengers central events that have occurred over the past couple of years. I don't think they honestly intend for the timing to happen the way it does. But what was happening with the Avengers post Civil War in the comics, leading up to their Heroes Reborn event, was actually a pretty interesting take on what would happen with what would happen if we have to legislate superheroes.
Well, I mean, both comic companies have done something with that, and I loved both of their approaches at their core. I think DC's stuff more often hit the mark, but it was also much less of a giant event, which I think is much harder to pull off.
Yeah, precisely.
And actually, I think one of DC's best examples of it is in Smallville. They basically do their own kind of registration act in that, and it's very interestingly done. But yeah, I mean, it's a cool story to try to figure out how you would regulate superheroes, if you even could.
Well, I think the thing about the Avengers is, and this is something that, with the exception of, say, the X-Men, is the core with a lot of the Marvel teams, and Avengers being a good example of it, is people with particular talents, people from different parts of life, different worldviews, seeing this greater threat and coming together and dealing with it. The Avengers have had so many diverse lineups. We won't mention the 90s Leather Jacket Squad. Why everyone
the best Leather Jacket Squad?
Oh, God, why did everyone have to wear those stupid aviator jackets? It made no sense. But the Avengers have always had a rather diverse lineup. It's been as many as, like, say, 16 members across 4 teams doing various roles in each team, to just 4 people because everyone was just done. It's a team where they actively vocalized the politics within it, the fact that they were privately funded, which that's never a good thing. The fact that the leadership passed, which for Marvel was a big deal, the leadership of the Avengers passed to several women over the course of times when it was like, a woman in charge of a superhero team? What are you writing? They've even, it's also brought in a lot of former villains like Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver and Hawkeye, who become probably some of the most renowned heroes within the Marvel universe as well. So the Avengers have always been like this interesting forum for Marvel to do whatever they want with. They can do either politically or social commentary related stories. They can do superheroes beating up costume bad guys, or they can do massive intergalactic, interdimensional, weird, metaphysical, trippy conflicts, which they're currently doing right now. So I've always liked how diverse the Avengers can be. The Marvel Cinematic Universe, unfortunately, has to kind of narrow its scope down, just because they are working with a medium that is probably a little less flexible than print comic.
Yeah.
And I think they
just don't have as much time to tell, but they've still covered a surprisingly large amount of that stuff, I think.
Yeah, the first Avengers movie was actually very faithful to the origin of them, which was Loki causing trouble, assemble.
And I mean, their Civil War was incredibly well done.
Yeah, and it was actually fairly well close to the core of Civil War too. I loved that.
Without the terrible ending.
And I feel like they made Tony a lot more understandable in the movie than they did in.
That's true. They did. And
comics.
I think it also helped that the ending did not end the way the comics
ended. Yeah,
because that kind of made that honestly had a lot of negative repercussions on Iron Man. The way that entire thing went down.
Well, I mean, it's kind of the only way that particular strain could have ended.
Right, and I think that was like when you're reading it, you were like, it's like you were reading the arc and you're like, this is going in a bad place. And you could kind of see, like, I think even authors kind of were like, this is getting uncomfortable. Like the way it had to escalate. It was like, oh, I definitely think some hands were tied on how that happened.
Which I love the fact that the X-Men almost exist like their own kind of like, they aren't a separate publishing line, but they almost exist like their own separate publishing line within Marvel. Like they have their own publishing office, because there was this, it was around the time the Civil War event occurred, around the time the events of House of M occurred, which the aforementioned event that we talked about was due to a X-Men Avengers crossover called House of M. Scarlet Witch goes insane, creates this world where mutants are in charge. Mm-hmm. Everyone starts to kind of slowly wake up. There's all this fallout that occurs. She realizes that she's insane. She hates her father. And then as she comes out of this, resets the world, she says no more mutants. And billions of mutants are depowered, leaving only 191 mutants powered. Of course, those are the 191 mutants that are the most viable to publish.
Coincidentally, I'm sure.
What?
Rip Jubilee. God, it's so bad what they did to her. But anyway, there's this beautiful bit where basically the X-Men do this, like, let's get all, because we have enough real estate, let's get all 200 mutants left, let's set them up refugee camp.
Find the last of our species.
Find the last of our species, bring them to the house, because that's a smart move. And Cyclops, there's a bunch of weird stuff, but basically Cyclops is in charge of the X-Men. Professor X is, we don't talk about him. Tony Stark rolls up to the X-Men's lawn.
Not talking about this arc.
Tony Stark rolls up to the X-Men's lawn and kind of looks at Cyclops and says, so this registration thing, and Cyclops just says, really?
Well, considering they did that already.
Well, no, actually, they never did officially do a Mutant Registration Act, but it was one of those things where Cyclops was like, no, we're not going to register. This is stupid. Look at our race. Our race is like, this is what's left of us. You can see them. They're on the back lawn playing volleyball.
They literally are all here.
But eventually they bypass that by doing some other weird stuff and becoming the official heroes of San Francisco. But yeah, it was literally a moment where Tony Stark, as you were mentioning, like Tony Stark got put in a bad place. He had to roll up to the mutants and go say, I need you to sign this sheet of paper. No!
I know, like, people, like, actively hunt you down and murder you, and we're gonna have to publish this, so they're gonna hunt you down and murder you, but I need you to do it anyway.
Oh my god.
Precisely. So, but the Avengers have always, but Civil War was a major turning point for the Avengers. They're thankfully kind of back to the semi-well-funded team that goes and handles global threats now, because Marvel is trying to bring several of their teams back to their core ideas so that people can get on board with them.
Which actually, and I actually think that ties into why the movies have trouble connecting people back to the books. Mm-hmm. Because, like, realistically for these people, the only way to find these books is the current ones, and a lot of them are so complicated and different, and not the cores that you see in the movies. That I think that's a big problem for people.
Mm-hmm.
Right,
I think,
hopefully
Marvel's learning the lesson that they need to have core books that kind of just, this is just kind of the X-Men, right? It just kind of does the X-Men things, right. And then they can have other arcs that they do things with to, like, sort of, explore those boundaries and push things a bit, but like.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I was going to say, too, like, with the Avengers, and Avengers is one of the ones that their original group compared to, just compare it to the cinematic group, right? The original group
Mm-hmm.
was Ant-Man, Hulk, Iron Man, Thor, and the Wasp. Captain America wasn't even in the original. He was later, he was brought in once they, thawed him out.
Pretty quick.
I think it was like, what was it, issue 4 or something? Like, it was pretty quick.
Yeah.
But the original group, of that original group, you only have 3 of them. Well, now Ant-Man, I think, is Ant-Man in the Avengers now in the cinematic universe?
No, he's directly out the Avengers.
Oh, okay. Because
He is a wanted
He was
criminal,
part- he
remember?
was-
Oh, that's
he
right.
was part of the Wakandan vacation squad, if I
Yeah.
remember correctly.
Yeah.
I just remember.
Yeah.
I just remember him fighting Falcon, being like.
Well, that
messing
was
up his
so. That
suit.
was. I mean, that was why he got recruited to the at that point, not the
Right.
Wakandan Vacation Squad, but soon to be the Wakandan Vacation Squad. Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, like, and there was the whole. I mean, there's a lot of drama within the original group that, as Damo has already mentioned, we're not going to get into because it gets really uncomfortable really fast. But
Well, the stuff I was talking about was actually a separate continuity, but
I was talking about between Ant-Man and Wasp.
that got worse in other books. That's what I was talking about.
Oh,
It's
it
worse
did.
in other
Oh, okay,
books.
we're not.
Oh,
We're
yeah.
definitely,
Oh, it got
we're
much
definitely-
worse.
we're not
In the
definitely-
Ultimates,
We're not
it's
talking
real
about the
bad.
Ultimate Universe. No, we're not talking about
No. Actually, I think that there are.
We're not going to mention Ultimate Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. Not at all.
We are not going to mention the Ultimates, but I think we do a disservice if we do not mention the Ultimate Universe.
Okay, so just real quick, Ultimate Universe, Marvel's separate publishing line. They wanted to try something new. They wanted to revigorate Spider-Man because at this point in the comics, Spider-Man was 30-something-year-old, married, happy, and not the angsty teenager wrestling with power and responsibility. So they launched Ultimate Spider-Man. That was kind of a reset, separate world, but it grew out from there with Ultimate X-Men, Ultimate. They just did an Avengers team called the Ultimates,
Which is what we're not talking about.
and then Ultimate Fantastic Four. And one of the core aspects of that publishing line was death is permanent. Not in seriously, death is permanent. The biggest arc they did was Who Killed Peter was the death of Spider-Man. It was the actual death of Peter Parker, which is where we get Miles
And he's never
Morales.
come back.
There was an event that they did called Ultimatum where Magneto kind of really lost his cool and played with like tides and wiped out I think 50% of the population. And almost except for like 3 members of the Ultimates and almost the entirety of the mutant race in the process.
Wow.
And it was permanent. There was no, hey, they're going to come back from the dead. It was, so we need a new Wolverine. How do we come up with a new Wolverine? We're out of ideas.
But I think
so.
For people wanting to read Spider-Man and not necessarily wanting to like sift through the many, many years, I actually think that Ultimate Spider-Man is a very good read. I think
Ultimate Spider-Man is amazing. Yeah,
it captures the core of him. Ultimate X-Men is pretty fun too, but it's kind of crazy.
It gets into Ultimate territory.
Yeah, Ultimate. No, I don't agree with that. I actually think it's valid and worth reading, unlike Ultimates. And then a lot of the other side stuff is a lot of fun. There's like Ultimate Team-Ups, which is really fun. It's just like random pairings of characters you might not have thought would pair, and some you would. Ultimate Daredevil, I think, is very good. But yeah, it's definitely worth looking at as long as you avoid Ultimates like the fiery plague that it is.
Well, and talking about random team-ups, you want to talk about the Defenders, and it's the original Defenders group.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, this is like the weirdest group. I was looking at these guys and I'm like, what is this?
And I actually was talking to Grizzly about this beforehand, and I kind of realized like when I threw that in there, I was like, oh no. No one else is going to know Okay, so for anyone who goes and reads a Defenders comic and go, why is Doctor Strange on the cover? Defenders is Doctor Strange's version of the Avengers. It's never a set lineup. It's always he brings in the right people for the right type of mission that he's setting up.
It's kind of Charlie's Angels, but with a wizard.
Yeah, precisely. Charlie Angels with Benedict Cumberbatch was a wizard, with Benedict Cumberbatch saying, we have to go save the world. The lineup has always shifted. There's been the Hulk on there. There's been Red She-Hulk. Yes, that's a thing.
She-Relay. Curious.
Machine Man. Like various B and C list heroes. It's where they took these characters that they wanted to do something with, but they didn't know what to do with. So they're like, just put them in this book. It wasn't until the cinematic universe dropped and they started doing the whole Netflix continuity that the Defenders became the title of the Luke Cage, Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Iron Fist team. they were all kind of, that entire group of heroes, the street level heroes, which I guess we'll kind of get into a little later, were all kind of just colloquially known at that point as like a heroes for hire type of a thing, because that was the main team.
That was Luke Cage and Iron Fist's
Iron Fist. Yeah, and there was those, and several of those characters, those street level characters, would cycle in and out as associates for heroes for hire.
Most notably, Colleen and
Misty.
Misty, yeah, also known as the Daughters of the Dragon.
But yeah, the Defenders is weird. It's like if you want to read some very straight up, this can only happen in a comic book type of stuff, go read the Defenders
or Doctor Strange in general.
Or Doctor Strange, yeah.
Another great title for that is a title called Exiles, which is marginally part of the X-Men thing, and the whole point of this, it's actually fairly brilliant. Like, there's sort of a central dude that is trying to fix things that have broken in various parts of the multiverse, and so he grabs people from other broken multiverses where they've essentially been deleted by the break, and says, well, you don't exist anymore, but if you come work for me, one of my other teams will eventually fix your universe and you'll be back. But until then, I'll keep you around if you will work for me, so that you can come back. And so they travel around to all of these bizarre timelines where stuff's crazy. Like, one of the most famous events in Marvel history is the Dark Phoenix storyline, right? Where Phoenix goes insane, and Jane goes insane and gets the Phoenix Force and ends up eating a bunch of planets. And traditionally, there's a big trial, and Scott sort of talks her down, and she sort of willingly gives up the power. Well, one of the very first things that the Exiles do in the comics is they go to a universe where that isn't supposed to happen. She is, in fact, supposed to be unrepentant and blow everything up. And so they do that, and like you just get to see Phoenix shredding the entire superhero portfolio of that universe, because she's basically a deity. And so that's kind of what the Exiles are. And there's actually not a ton of it, but it's a lot of fun, in my opinion.
I just like the tagline. Well, you don't exist, but if you work for me, you could possibly
maybe you will
come
again.
back.
Yeah. You'll probably die before.
Great selling point. Great selling point.
I mean,
sounds like Cade trying to recruit you for something.
Captive audience, man.
Captive audience. You don't really have anywhere else to go.
And it's another thing where they grab a lot of B sort of line characters, like characters you may think you'd never see again. One of my favorites from the Age of Apocalypse stuff, Blink is in it. One of the first characters is Nightcrawler's daughter or granddaughter. I honestly don't remember. There's just a lot of really cool, because it's a line they could do whatever they wanted in, right? The universes didn't matter. There was no need for continuity. They could kill characters and leave them dead because they'd never be back to that universe, and it was just.
And that's the thing that's the brilliant thing I've always admired about Marvel, is what you just said right there. Unlike DC, which occasionally has to go, oh, wait, who wrote what again? Marvel's just like, oh, yeah, that happened in a different dimension. Well, was it real? Yeah, no, it's continuity. It's canon, but it happened over here.
Yeah. I mean, actually, DC does do the same stuff. Some of their weirder stuff is where Earth 2 originally came from. So DC has gotten on that train too, and DC has their own. Like, we don't really know who wrote what anymore, so we're just gonna crisis now.
Like, for example, back in the 80s, there was Marvel would put out Marvel had like this separate publishing line which did kind of kid-friendly comics. Richie Rich, Heathcliff the Cat, Strawberry Shortcake, stuff like that. One of the ones they put out was Spider-Ham. It was an anthropomorphic pig version of Spider-Man, Peter Porker, who was bitten by.
It's all pig jokes. It's pig jokes all the way down, man.
Now, here's the funny thing. Here's the funny thing.
He's part of Marvel canon now, boy.
He is, because there was an event called Edge of the Spider-Verse, where Spider-Man had to recruit all these Spider-Men from various universes, which is where we got Spider-Gwen, by the way, and I'm very thankful for that.
Is that where that came from? I was wondering where that
Spider-Gwen started as a one-shot, And after like its 5th printing, Marvel's like, okay, fine, we'll give her a series. Like a punk band.
He's underselling that a little too. It wasn't just that it was selling out; it was the fans were screaming in every possible place to scream.
There was a punk band that found out, oh, Spider-Gwen is in a band. In that comic, she was part of a band called the Mary Janes. This like little 3-piece punk band out of Texas changed their name temporarily, created a whole new band profile, and then put out like a 6-song EP as the Mary Janes.
Wow.
The Spider-Gwen love is understated. But anyway, Spider-Ham is legit because he got brought into the Edge of the Spider-Verse event as one of the agents of the Spider-Verse, the Web Warriors, as they call themselves.
Which actually Straczynski, J. Michael Straczynski, who's a certifiable genius, kind of started ages ago.
So the thing is but again, that's the beautiful thing about Marvel. It happened over here, but it's still canon.
They are definitely much more willing to reach into the basement and just like, oh, this is weird. Okay, let's do this. Let's put this back. Let's just put this back. Let's just put this right back in continuity and see what happens.
Beard, what are you?
Howard the Duck. That's all I got to say.
I love Howard.
You just took the words out of my mouth because I was going to ask, was there any kind of crossover with Howard and Ham? Because if that didn't happen, that needed to happen.
No, but there have been a couple crossovers recently with Howard and Rocket.
Right, I've seen those.
Yeah, well,
and Howard shows up in one of my...
It's in the cinematic universe, too. Howard shows up in the Guardians.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
It's like that's going to immediately make that movie go R-rated. You know that, right?
Oh no! The reason why the cameo, that's the reason why it was after the credits.
Mm-hmm.
Just a cameo.
And he didn't. I don't think he said anything. He was drinking.
No,
though. He was drinking, but he didn't say anything because you're right. That would have.
He actually shows up in one of my favorite of Marvel's new titles, which is Mockingbird. Which is an utterly fantastic read.
I really love that series.
I can't. It's interesting because like there's the letters to the editor, so to speak, at the end, as there usually is in comics, and one person's like, well, because it's sort of a female centric book, in that Mockingbird is female and it's sort of her doing her thing, and it's kind of like somebody asks, why is there just Beefcake? Why don't we ever see any, half naked females? And they're like, well, this is told from her perspective. So like, she probably never really accentuates or remembers herself in, compromising positions. But when, Hawkeye or her boyfriend I don't remember his name now. God, I'm so bad with names. She remembers that. That's an important part of the story to her. So that's, why, she's wearing sort of normal stuff, and they're half naked most of the time.
And also because it's
to be honest, and I will say that Hawkeye is one of my favorite characters. If anyone likes the character Hawkeye from the movie, but just realize Hawkeye in the movie is nothing like Hawkeye in the comics. Hawkeye in the comics is a former criminal that became an Avenger. He was actually part of Captain America's the second iteration, most popular iteration of the Avengers was the Cap's. I'm not lying. This is what they called it. Cap's Freaky Four.
Mm-hmm.
It was Captain America, Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, and Hawkeye. That was it. Captain America and 3 ex-cons.
Yeah, I remember Scarlet Witch, and in the normal continuity, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver are Magneto's children, and
it's not anymore.
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, well, actually, and the funny thing is like they quickly renounce their father's evil ways, etc., and so forth.
Yeah,
but
his ways. Let's not.
Yeah. Let's not say that. Yeah,
let's get to the X-Men part before we fight.
But basically, Hawkeye is one of my favorite. He's presented as someone who's everywhere. He's an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. He's an Avenger. He's a major screw up. And if anyone can, go read the Matt Fraction, David Aja, AJA run on Hawkeye, My Life as a Weapon. It's wonderfully told, and it actually gives you very good insight as to, and I'm no lie, first lines in it, he's like, I fight villains with a weapon from the Paleolithic era. I had to look that up. Paleolithic. That's it. That's what he says. That's the type of guy he is. So.
And then, real quick, just to run through, do you want to run through some of the villainous organizations that we see in Marvel before we go into the full blown fight that is going to be X-Men?
Oh God! Well, we still got a couple of other teams too, don't we? Like we have
we have the Inhumans, which I'm assuming is a tender subject for DJ right now.
No, it's just frustrating. That's all.
Where even is that at? It's canceled again, right, or something?
It's canceled again.
It was only 8. It was only 8 episodes. I think they just kind of filmed it, and they're like, "Well, that was a bad idea, but at least let's put it on Hulu." It's on Hulu, by the way. I got 5 minutes in. I stopped.
Yeah, I like Marvel, but they're definitely, outside of Netflix, obviously struggling with the TV division.
Yeah,
just a bit.
So basically, they are the Inhumans are humans that were kidnapped by this alien race called the Kree. They were experimented on and turned into weapons, kind of like mutants, but mutants kind of naturally evolved from humanity. The Inhumans were created, and then when exposed to a certain chemical called terrigen, if you've seen the show Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., you probably know this. They develop powers that are specifically designed to serve some role in society. Originally, the Inhumans started off as it was the royalty, Black Bolt, Medusa. It was the royal court that kept all the Inhumans safe on their city, on the moon, in an air bubble. I don't know. Jack Kirby, everyone.
Jack
Kirby.
I mean, this is the guy who brought us the New Gods, right? This guy's a genius, but he's definitely a little out there.
But basically, that's what it was. The Inhumans was played up to a little bit more of the political intrigue, alien connections, in occasionally Fantastic Four, because several members of the Inhumans were members of the Fantastic Four, like Medusa or Crystal. Medusa actually showed up, I think, in a Spider-Man comic first as a possible villain, and then I think they just went a different direction with her. Now the Inhumans kind of became Marvel's new mutants, quote unquote, when they didn't have a naturally occurring power set within humanity. They couldn't use mutants because of Fox and copyright. So the Inhumans are now a little bit more spread out. They're more ingrained into society. But that's what the Inhumans were. They were kind of space royalty with massive superpowers, and very weird. Do not watch the TV show. I'm telling you, just spare yourself. Go read the comics. Okay, I'm just going to rant about this. The character's name is Medusa. Her power is she has long red hair that she can use. It's iron strength. It's her limbs. She's stupid powerful. What do? They shave off her head. Shave off her hair. Okay, I'm done.
Nothing could ever go wrong with that.
Well, it's literally impossible in the comics. You can't remove her hair.
Well, and then
Wolverine's skeleton probably breaks before her hair does.
Oh God! All right, calm down. But that's it.
Speaking of breaking people,
for the man sobbing on the ground.
For a few of the other heroes that I found interesting, because I actually never even really connected these. Blade. So yes, the vampire hunter Blade is actually from Marvel. Obviously Punisher, most people recognize that. He was one of the later additions to and he's also one of the very shining example of a hero who isn't really a hero, and even he admits that he's not a hero, but he actually looks up to Captain America.
I would argue that you can't call him a hero because what he does is never heroic, right? He's not ever trying to be a hero. He accidentally or sort of does heroic things on the way to do what he wants, but it's never, well, not never, but rarely his choice, right?
Like, the heroic part of it? Yeah.
Yeah, if a dude's like mugging a lady and he shoots her, it's probably because for other reasons, and that lady just got super lucky that, he did it then.
Right,
not necessarily.
The collateral benefit of the Punisher is not his collateral benefit.
She's collateral benefit, not somebody getting saved.
And then obviously Deadpool, which a lot of people are very familiar with Deadpool nowadays. But Deadpool was a very late addition. He didn't get introduced until, I think, 91.
91, and even then he was just introduced as kind of a
comic relief.
He wasn't even comic relief when they first introduced him. He was unfortunately one of the footless creations from Leafield that just was a thorn in Cable's side and would occasionally make boilerplate snarky comments and then disappear somewhere. And it wasn't until, I can't remember who wrote it, but it wasn't until later they turned him into the wisecracking, near unkillable person that we all have fallen in love with.
He's even gone through some shifts since then to be much more of a kind of integral character.
Yeah, I mean he's officially now been an X-Man, that was a thing. Like his rolling arc since like the 2000s has been he went on a recruitment drive where he kept trying to join different superhero teams, kept trying to show everyone he was a hero, and eventually the X-Men let him in for like 2 seconds, and he had like a homemade X-Men suit on, and they're like, "This is creepy, get out." But he was on X-Force. Though. No, seriously, he showed up. It was really awkward, that scene, him in a homemade X-Men suit. And then later on, he actually does join the Avengers. He gets the official invitation from a very aged, won't go into that story, Captain America, to join the Avengers. The reason being, the Avengers are out of funding. Tony Stark is not funding them. So Deadpool, however, being the celebrity that he is funding the Avengers. So,
nice. So he actually buys his way onto the Avengers.
Yeah, kind of. But now, but for anyone who likes
that,
but for anyone who does like the merciless mercenary with a mouth that you saw in the movies that just didn't care and did his own thing, start reading the comics now, because the Despicable Deadpool is this title of the new series, and it's him going back to his roots.
Nice. Well, and then there's also Moon Knight, which was a big. Moon Knight was, what was that, mid 70s, 80s?
Yeah.
He's a complicated character.
He's a very complicated. Yeah, another complicated is Ghost Rider. Ghost Rider from 72. He's
I would say the Ghost Rider is not always complicated, whereas Moon Knight is.
But I think that kind of goes back to the conversation about the who's writing him too.
Yeah, right, I currently like the new Ghost Rider myself.
I would just say that at their core, Ghost Rider isn't necessarily complicated.
Oh,
right? The concept is not complicated. Whereas the core of Moon Knight, I still don't 100%.
He was Batman. He was Marvel's attempt to create Batman and play up on that whole idea of, is Batman crazy? And here's Moon Knight. We're like, yes, he is. Yeah, but the unfortunate thing with Moon Knight is they've never quite nailed down whether he has superhuman powers because of his origin, or if it's just one of his other personalities taking the lead and he thinks that this stuff is happening. I mean, he is legitimately that kind of a character that there's a reason his series only come out in small bursts, because there's really only so much you can do with him as a character without tripping over his own continuity. But he is cool, and I love his outfit.
Yeah. So let's look at villains for a little bit. So we have some of the villains that come immediately to mind is the group. So we'll start with the teams. Sinister Six, which was they have a pretty entertaining origin story, actually. The original group for the Sinister Six was Dr. Octopus, Vulture, Electro, Kraven the Hunter, Mysterio, and Sandman. And this kind of goes into Damo's explanation of villains kind of having simple motives. They're really easy to figure out. They're really easy to figure out. And so,
if I remember correctly, that is the entire reason they got together.
Yes, that is the entire reason Dr. Octopus put this together. He got tired of Spider-Man just wiping the floor with him. And so basically he finally gets out of the prison or whatever that he's in, and he puts out this call to like all of the villains that Spider-Man has over the years put in put away, and only 5 of them are like, okay, fine, we'll come work with you. And they're like, even the 5 that come work with them, like Vulture, and like they all hate each other. Like they do not work well together at all. But the entire origin of the Sinister Six was literally, we're tired of Spider-Man beating us. We're gonna beat Spider-Man. That was kind of it. That was kind of it.
So there's one of the first examples that I know of the, like, in comics at least, of the tearing themselves apart because they're the bad guys and like snatching defeat from the jaws of victory.
Oh yeah. Oh good.
Yeah, quite literally.
Yeah.
Which if you want to read a really good series based loosely around the idea of the Sinister Six, we won't go into it too much, but there was the retitling of Spider-Man a couple of years back was called The Superior Spider-Man.
Oh yeah.
Which was basically Dr. Octopus took over Peter Parker's body.
Oh god. Oh no.
Yep.
And made him a better Spider-Man, no lie.
Well...
But yeah. That's the whole point of the series. That's the whole point of the series. Go read Superior Spider-Man. It was actually quite good. But anyway, one of the offshoot series they did of it was in the very first issue, a bunch of C-list Spider-Man villains, the Beetle, Boomerang, Shocker, get together and form their own Sinister Six. And it's a pathetic joke of a Sinister Six. So you have this brand new Spider-Man who's actually Otto Octavius running around in Peter Parker's body going, I'm going to make this better. I'm going to hit Parker where he messed up all this mistake. And these people show up saying, all these people show up saying, we're the Sinister Six. And the first words out of his mouth are, of the unmitigated gall. And proceed to beat them senseless. But then they go off to do their own book called The Superior Foes of Spider-Man. And it is a 22-issue run of these villains literally snatching defeat from the jaws of victory.
Yep. Every bleeding time.
But highly recommend it if you like the idea of a doofy team that's trying to take itself seriously. Like, go read The Superior Foes of Spider-Man.
And then before we jump to Brotherhood, Masters of Evil. I don't remember Masters of Evil. What they was it? It was Zemo. I know Zemo.
It was Zemo.
But were they against Avengers, or
they've always just kind of been around, like mostly the Avengers, but they've largely kind of either been very Hydra affiliated, or they've been mostly like a bunch of Captain I'm just looking it up right now. They've always had different people lead them. Zemo, Ultron, Zemo again, Otto Octavius, Crimson Cowl. Yeah, like mainly Zemo though. It's been mostly Zemo's softball team. Let's see here. Yeah, I'm not too really familiar. Again, another, but they do give us another iconic Avenger. They initially bring Wonder Man, Simon Williams, over to their side, and
because Wonder Man was one of the original of the Masters of Evil.
Mm-hmm.
And then I know Enchantress was a pretty powerful figure, wasn't she the one that she was the one that jacked around with Thor and convinced everyone that Thor was convinced everyone that Thor was insane.
Yeah, and basically one of Odin's attempts to become, worst father ever. He basically hires he basically has Enchantress seduce Thor because he doesn't like the idea of Thor being in love with a human.
Yeah, obviously that's it.
Yeah, let that sink in for a moment there. But yeah, no, that was her whole deal. She was there to play like the other woman and failed horribly.
Well, in talking about Thor, you of course have Loki, who's kind of been around since the beginning.
Yeah, he's the reason the Avengers got together. And Loki's also one of those characters that Marvel's really kind of leaning into using more. I think mostly just because of Tom Hiddleston and the cinematic universe's portrayal of him. Like he's showing up everywhere now. There was a storyline for a period of time where he died committing a heroic act, so they brought him back, but as a kid, because there always had to be a god of stories and tricks. So it was a whole series about Kid Loki.
Wow. I
Very
know
well
that
written.
they did,
Very well written too, though.
They did the animated comic book back when I think one of the first Thor movies came out. I think it was the first Thor movie. They did an animated comic series with Loki and Thor that kind of like tried to explain Loki and Thor's, at least in the cinematic universe's story, their whole childhood and interaction. It was pretty well done. They did the same thing with Iron Man and the Exodus. No, wait. What? Not Exodus. That's Destiny.
God,
the cellular
Extremis.
Yeah.
Extremis.
So
yeah. Yeah. Which for Loki fans, go start reading Doctor Strange. That's all I can say.
Mm-hmm. Which makes sense that they kind of are hand in hand, because Loki does a lot of that. And then that leads us a little bit into Hydra, which is interestingly. Yeah, pretty much. They are the excuse that Marvel has to punch Nazis in the face.
Pretty much.
I mean, I don't really think there's really needs to be any other introduction to Hydra. Though, okay, so here's a question. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the TV show,
yes,
has Hydra. They actually introduced the character Hydra. Was that in? Because I thought Hydra. I thought I remember him differently from the comics.
Yeah, you are correct. Hydra in the comics, Madam Hydra, Hive was a very different thing. What they effectively did, if you're referring to what was it, Grant?
Grant, yeah, who basically was possessed.
For. Yeah. He was basically that Hydra was a reskin of a villain that they had called Hive.
Right, because Hive was not. Right, Hive wasn't the main big bad of Hydra in the comics, was he?
Yeah. Yeah, no, he was just actually something they created in their labs.
Okay.
So he was Hydra created, but he was kind of just something Hydra went up, whipped up.
Okay, so he wasn't the inspiration of Hydra like it was in the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
No.
Okay.
No.
Because I remember watching, I was like, it was something that was like, it was close enough, I think, to what I haven't read comics in so long, sadly, that a lot of my memories are kind of clouded. So I'm like, I recognize this character, but I don't recognize that as being what they're saying, which cinematic universe, there's a lot of that happening.
Yeah.
So.
All
right. Well, I'm going to get out of the way, and we're going to talk about the Brotherhood of the Mutants.
Round one.
Actually, no, I don't think there's going to be a row over this. I think we're both on the same page.
Yeah, probably.
I agree Magneto was right. I also agree Cyclops was right, but we'll get into that later. Yeah, so basically, Brotherhood of Mutants.
It was, so just real quick, the original grouping was in about March of 1964 was when they were kind of introduced. The original group was Magneto. Of course, Magneto's kind of mostly always been the leader of that group. And then there was Mastermind, Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch, and the ever-present Toad. I mean, who's obviously the most powerful of them all.
Janitor. No lie. For anyone wondering where are they now in the current Marvel continuity, Toad was fired from the school as janitor. He was their janitor because Wolverine took pity on him, and then he screwed up, and now he got fired for being a janitor. Yeah.
Yeah, that feels right.
That felt right.
That felt right.
No, the Brotherhood of Evil, the Brotherhood of Mutants, it was originally called the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. And then later on, because X-Men is more of like the social commentary type of title branch. I don't know how to put it. I can't word well right now. It eventually just got down to Brotherhood of Mutants, and then, of course, they had like a couple of the female characters go, "Wait, Brotherhood?" But they were the progenitor group of antagonistic mutants, or the X-Men's interpretation of mutants who really weren't down for coexisting with humans. And that later on led to other groups like the Mutant Liberation Front, Excel, and other such organizations.
Damo?
And, definitely my favorite of the things. I really, the thing that makes X-Men shine to me really is the confrontation between the two sort of ideals, which is that mutants, like the Brotherhood and Magneto, legitimately think that mutants can't coexist with humans. It's not that they don't want to. It's that they feel. I mean, well, some of them don't want to, but I think like in Magneto's case, particularly from his experiences, as we've talked about, he feels like he literally can't, because like humans will just keep recreating these nightmares, and particularly putting people that look different or are different. And since realistically the whole universe is going to change, humanity's just going to keep repeating these mistakes because that's all they've done. And so the Brotherhood is his attempt to protect his species from extermination. And in many ways, humanity has proved him right time and time again.
Genosha.
Yeah. Let's just have a moment there for Genosha.
It's also interesting to point out that Magneto is not just like, you have certain villains in certain books, like that are basically tied to certain titles. For example, like Immortus in the Avengers, Doctor Doom for Fantastic Four, Dr. Octopus for Spider-Man. Certain villains lend themselves primarily to particular protagonists. Magneto within the Marvel Comics universe is generally feared and respected everywhere. No one messes with him. What we were mentioning by saying Genosha was in the Marvel Comics universe, there was a island state called Genosha that enslaved mutants. And after the X-Men kind of had their way with that nation, after they kidnapped several of the students from the school, the UN decided the best way to keep Magneto quiet was to give him his own nation, which worked until someone blew it up with Sentinels.
Yeah.
So basically, it's one of those things where, like, there's been other circumstances where, most recently in the storyline Secret Empire, Magneto was basically promised a safe haven for mutants in exchange for non-interference. He's one of those characters that really everyone knows what he's capable of, so they don't want to test him. And the X-Men continually do, up until the point where he actually does kind of join them, or he starts leading his own X-Men squads, or the X-Men are like a big family. People are just going to join at some point in time, and you'll just have to accept that villain is now a hero.
Mm-hmm. Or at least working for them.
Yeah, at least working for them, yeah.
Yeah, it's delightfully complicated.
Well, and I think that's what makes Marvel so entertaining to read, is that, you know, and I'm not digging at DC there, because DC kind of does this as well, but Marvel does it very beautifully in the sense that they present the characters as having realistic responses to things. So like you can have a hero who gets mad, and these are super powered figures. They get mad, and they have an instance of, like, you know, they make a mistake. Well, what happens when a mutant makes a mistake? That has implications that are far greater than if, you know, I were to make a mistake. Or you have individuals like Magneto, who, you know, has arguably a very admirable end game, Like his end goal is basically like what you guys are saying, is to protect his species, because he sees the world from, and Marvel really does a good job of showing how they get created. And I think is the other thing that, especially with Magneto, you see that, which we've kind of gone back and back on. But like you see where his past influences the way he sees his future, even and definitely how he sees his present. But even Magneto changes over time. The fact that he has children changes the way he does things. The fact that, to a degree, the way he does, the way that he changes when he joins the X-Men for the time that he joins them, and and all this stuff. He's an evolving character, whereas a lot of people will look at comic books and see, oh, these are just two-dimensional figures that are static and not changing. Marvel does a really good job in presenting figures that actually evolve and actually grow through their experiences. And I think that's what... No, go for it.
No. Go ahead, finish your thought. Sorry.
I was saying that's what, to me, that's why when I do get a chance to read comics, most of the time I do find myself drawn to the Marvel comics, because they usually have story, and it's a cumbersome thing too, because you have to usually read the full story to understand what's going on, but it's an entertaining story, and it's a story that most readers can relate to. So that's all I was. Yeah. Go ahead, Kent.
Well, no, and I was saying, like, a really good example, like, it drifts away from X-Men for a moment, but like one of the best examples for that is Iron Man, Demon in a Bottle. Like, one of his most iconic storylines is Tony Stark wrestling with alcoholism. Right. And the implications that here is this billionaire with a super suit who's flying around drunk, and he causes a lot of collateral damage. And it becomes that thing where Marvel had to take a hard line in the sand, and like they had to take that risk. They'd say, like, okay, here's a flaw. Here's a very hard to write flaw. Mm-hmm. We're going to also have to make this stick. And Tony's sobriety has been one of those like hallmarks of his character since then. But again, very good example of Marvel trying to create a more realistic and more flawed type of character that you as the reader can relate to in that aspect. Or even say like Peter Parker to some extent with, the person who has a lot of talent, a lot of power, but constantly has to wrestle with responsibility and a lot of self-confidence as well. Characters like that, and that's what really I think makes the publishing line or the comics really appealing in that aspect, is that there is some character in the Marvel universe that you're going to trip across and go like, I can relate to that character. That is my character right there. Whether it's like some little some person that only appears as a member of the side team, Nightcrawler.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
Nightcrawler. I'm sorry, I love Nightcrawler. He's my favorite. He can't hold a solo book. No. Or if it's a major character like Wolverine, right. You're going to find a character in the Marvel universe that you can identify with fairly easily, just because of that.
Well, and I mean, like another one that I think of when you talk about flawed characters, and I can't remember if it was the Ultimate version or if it was the Amazing X-Men, but Angel's backstory about his father making him file down his wings.
That was Ultimate.
Was that Ultimate?
That was Ultimate.
Yeah, like that.
Ultimates,
I mean,
yeah.
I remember reading that particular arc and just being like. And it's just, again, it's one of those things where it's like they don't, and I love this about Marvel. They don't, well, I'm sure they do hesitate to a degree, but they don't really seem to hesitate to present multifaceted figures. Like these are not perfect beings. These are flawed beings who have happened to acquired in some fashion or way superpowers. Whether that is because you got bit by a spider, you were born with something that automatically targets you, depending on what side of the spectrum you're on that one, and it's just, I don't know, I really really appreciate how Marvel does that to their heroes, because there's a very easy line to take where you present a hero as this, Superman, and Superman has gotten better. I mean, he has gotten better, but like the original superheroes, they were presented in that limelight, perfect pedestal figure, and now we're looking at it in today's world where they're kind of, ironically, they're humanizing these figures who are above humanity. I think that's Marvel just hits that nail on the head, I think.
Precisely,
because that's part of. I agreed, because I think that's what they've always been trying to do.
Right, and I think that probably explains why Marvel, I think, has always kind of called me more than DC. DC kind of tends to write, it feels like in like a pendulum swing, like that it's very extremes. And again, DC has gotten a lot better with this, but like originally DC was kind of like it's Batman, Superman. It's opposite ends of a polarity. Whereas Marvel, I don't know, and I have only really read recent, like air quote recent, like early 2000s, late 90s Marvel, was when I kind of was really heavy into the reading of the comic books. And so like at that point it was kind of, they were already kind of over that edge of that hesitation, and they were already kind of it felt like they were already exploring that flawed hero concept.
Well, I think to some extent that's just been what they've wanted from the beginning.
Well, and Stan Lee's even pointed that out. Like when asked about the creation of the Hulk, Stan Lee pointed out that he wanted a character that kind of represented that anger and frustration that a skinny nerdy kid had. Like what if they had that power to suddenly become that big, hulking, strong person that that doesn't take that bullying lying down.
Mm-hmm.
And that is in and of itself the creation of the Hulk. That kind of a power fantasy in a sense, but unlike being a power fantasy where there's no repercussions, because now you have that strength and you're recognized for it. You're a rampaging beast that cannot be stopped. Everyone is scared of you. And you've left a lot of damage in your wake.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I'm the Hulk. Oh, I'm the Hulk.
Right. Well, it's Frankenstein's monsters.
Yeah. I'd much rather be She-Hulk, but, hey, lawyer salary and the ability to control it, sure, I'll take that. Mm-hmm.
She has a better life, yeah.
Well, up until recently, she had a better life.
I'd argue she still does, but you're kind of grading on a curve here, and the Hulk's real low on that curve. I mean, he's just dragging the mean down. I mean, this is the guy who accidentally broke Harlem.
True. This is a guy that got so bad.
That is not an over-exaggeration.
He broke Harlem.
I mean, there's no air quotes. It's not like he had. I mean, that's the thing, right? That's like, sure, it changes at points, but he's not in control. You can't, like, you can't blame his actions on him, because he is like you were saying, like literally a personification of blind, incoherent rage.
Right. Though watching the cinematic universe version of Hulk beat up on Thor is just amazing.
Hulk's taken on pretty much everybody and beating them down at some point.
I know. It's just his random punching of Thor is just the best part of every movie. What was that? Was that Age of? Was that the Age of Ultron?
That was the first one.
When they crash down on one of the giant scaly fish ship things, they're like kind of looking happy and content, and he just smashes
him. that particular clip just to me just makes me.
I need you to understand that I am in charge.
That's exactly what he's like. Just in case you forgot. Just in case you forgot.
I think that's the third best scene in that movie, and only because it's up against some real stiff competition. Because obviously Loki Ragdoll is number one. I mean, Loki Ragdoll might be best seen in any comic book movie at the time. Particularly because of that little squeak that somehow Tom Hiddleston managed to make at the end. And number 2 goes to Shawarma Scene because Shawarma Scene is fantastic.
Oh my god.
I haven't seen the new Thor, but from the trailer,
Oh god.
It's not out yet.
nails
It's
it.
not out yet.
He
right?
nails that role just for that one reason, because in the trailer there's that bit where they're hyping up where, Hulk Thor's in the arena and they're hyping up Hulk and they announce Hulk, and they cut to that split second of Loki just leaning back on the couch like, oh no. No.
Yeah.
The one from the trailer.
I didn't sign on for this. I didn't.
The one that I remember is when they're in the
outta here.
ship and they're like in the ship's password is
Oh,
like,
yeah.
who is the strongest Avenger? Me, Thor. Incorrect.
Since did we get a chance to talk on the cosmic stuff? Because we got a lot of. I know we don't have much time, but do we have much cosmic stuff?
Let's jump into a bit. Let's start
That's
cosmic.
That's all you.
Okay.
Nothing about
All right.
that.
Well, then we'll start with the team since we're talking heroes and characters. Guardians of the Galaxy. Well known for the 5-person team that is in the cinemas: Star-Lord, Drax, Groot, Rocket, Gamora. Actually, a little bit more of an esoteric beginning to them. They were introduced initially in 1969. The roster was very different. It was a roster of major. That was a later roster. Charlie 67, Martin X, Yondu, Starhawk, and Major Victory. They never could hold down their own title at all, really. So they were just kind of people that they would bring in. That were, hey, we're from space, and X-Men did that way better, so Guardians kept getting shuffled to the wayside. Then eventually when Marvel kind of leaned into the full cosmic stuff in like the 90s with the Infinity Gauntlet, Adam Warlock, granted those things just did come well before the 90s, but they really leaned into it with the Infinity Gauntlet. We got to see more of an interest in cosmic-based characters. Unfortunately, that interest kind of died back down when the comic industry popped when it did in the 90s. And in 2008, Abnett and Lanning, very good comic sci-fi writing team, revived the Guardians as a new team led by Star-Lord, who basically breaks out of prison when he's captured by the Nova Corps, and starts basically just recruiting whoever he can to hold off, like, I think it was the Annihilation Wave? I can't remember. But
yeah.
it was the Annihilation Wave.
It's not that he breaks out, actually. They let him out to stop.
Oh, yeah, that's right. To stop it. And basically,
they give him a team of misfits at best.
Yeah, Rocket's in there, and he basically just kind of asks Rocket, like, what you can do.
And Groot's in there.
Yeah.
Phyla shows up later.
Phyla-Vel, but basically Adam Warlock. But basically, they kind of become an official Avengers-style team where they have a central location. They kind of report to an authority, which was Cosmo. This is another thing I love about Marvel. Remember the dog the Russians shot into space in early original?
He's a hero.
He's a character. His name is Cosmo, and the dog survived and developed telepathy.
And intelligence. Don't forget the intelligence.
And intelligence.
Telepathy on a dog is not super interesting.
But he's super intelligent, and so he runs the show on Nowhere, which is that giant celestial's head. So the Guardians were reporting to a dog for a long period of time, which really Rocket did not like. But basically then, after an event, I don't remember the exact name of the event, but basically the current iteration of the Guardians kind of fizzled after an event that took place where, to get rid of Thanos, they threw him into a place called the Cancerverse, where basically nothing ever dies because he's obsessed with death. But Star-Lord, Drax, and Nova get trapped in there with him. Years go by, suddenly they reboot the series in time for the movie. Star-Lord, Gamora, Drax, that's your current lineup. If you ever read any of the current series, they do actually explain how Drax and Star-Lord survived, kind of, maybe. We don't know yet. But that's where we get the current iteration, where to get people interested in the comic, they've been having members of the Avengers as liaisons. So Iron Man was part of the first team. Then they put Venom, Agent Venom, Flash Thompson up there.
Space Knight Venom.
Space Knight Venom, yeah, which best version of Venom in my opinion. I'm sorry, I know there was Eddie Brock fans, but Flash Thompson Venom was my favorite.
I agree because they keep messing up Brock. We can do a Venom thing because he's my favorite.
Yeah.
He's one of my favorite Marvel characters.
And but basically, then they also bring in Kitty Pryde and Thing from the X-Men and Fantastic Four, respectively. So basically, and now currently Ant-Man, Scott Lang. So the Guardians kind of act as like that. Yeah, the good Ant-Man. Guardians act as like the bridge team between the cosmic stuff and Earth. Which is kind of important considering the big movie event that Marvel's trying to put out right now to connect the two parts of the cinematic universe that they've been working
I also
on.
want to put out that the stuff leading up to Annihilation and Annihilation are some of the best Marvel event stuff I have ever read. Might actually be the best, so I highly recommend it to anybody who enjoys.
Seriously good sci-fi. Really good sci-fi.
If you really enjoy the movies and you want to know more, that stuff is very good. The follow-up, Annihilation Conquest, is still good, but nowhere near the original. And then just do yourself a favor and in my opinion, stop after that.
I don't know. This stuff has been good. But then again, I'm a big Rocket fan. I'm a Rocket fan.
The reboot is fine. I meant for that run. Sorry. I was getting there. The reboot is fine. It's just that run, they kind of go dark and emo for no particular reason.
Yeah. No, I get you.
And they train wreck a couple of characters that I think were really centerpieces for the team, and so I just don't think it works very well.
Adam Warlock.
Well, Adam Warlock and Phyla-Vell were both fantastic, and they train wrecked both of them.
For anyone who wonders and why, for anyone who's ever only watched the Marvel movies and you've gone to the movies with a friend to go see Guardians and they start freaking out that they start repeating the words Adam Warlock over and over again.
If you were in my theater and you heard somebody squee loudly, that's why. Like I literally shrieked with glee when they did that.
Basically, gold skin space wizard. He's Osiris. To put it in Destiny terms, he's Osiris.
He's kind of like Osiris and like Ikora and like other people combined. He's
space magic.
He's big. He's big. He's big. He's big awesomes. And the thing that's great, the thing that's cool about him and makes him work is that he's very powerful, but he's also very cool. Like he's just a fun character when he's written right. Like
when he's written right.
He's a good guy, right? Like he's just doing his thing, trying to make the world work.
And that does lead us into one of the most iconic villains, I think, for Marvel, that the movies can never seem to get right. Big Purple, or now Big Gold. Galactus, the World Eater.
Well, he's only been in one movie, and let's face it, that series has always been a train wreck.
But basically, Galactus is basically. I love the way someone referred to him, because there was a comic where they were discussing the way that mortal Marvel characters perceive these galactic entities, and they were discussing the fact that Galactus is the world devourer. You know, people see this giant purple dude with this tuning fork on his head. And these overcomplicated machines, and some dude in silver on a surfboard buzzing around his head, saying, "You're scheduled to be destroyed in like 2 minutes." They bring it up like, do you think that Galactus actually looks like some dude in purple pajamas running around eating planets? No, you have no concept of what he is. But that is pretty much what he is. He's giant world devourer. I don't think his origins ever changed over the years. He's always been fairly consistent in that role. That when you see him coming, you know you're kind of done.
Unless you're Earth.
Unless you're Earth, in which case you are a constant pain in his behind. Basically, he was a humanoid. He was basically kind of like the last of his kind. basically, he's got so many different.
The best way I think to think about him is that he's a force of nature. Like
Yeah.
you can't assign good or evil to him. It's the thing he does. It happens to be evil from our perspective, and I mean you could argue lots of different aspects of philosophy with me over Twitter if you want, but like he's a force of nature. There's no controlling it.
No,
Unless you're
There's
Earth.
no.
unless you're
Well,
Earth.
but that's not even controlling it. It's just delaying it, right? Like he's
Right,
pretty
I
clear
guess
about that. Like
yeah.
he's just coming back later.
He's like,
Like,
fine.
I mean, that's pretty much been most of the Galactus plots. He rolls up to Earth, Reed Richards and the Fantastic Four come out with a newspaper, shoo him off, and
He's like,
squirt him with a water bottle, go
you're not
get
dead
off.
yet?
And
Oh, okay, I'll be back in a bit.
he's operating at a loss because every time he shows up with a new herald, they quit, and so he has to leave.
Don't we keep taking them?
We keep taking them.
Some go their own way. Some have become as villainous or more villainous than he was.
He's tried taking existing heroes, turning them into heralds, and then they're like, "Wow, this is a crap job," and then they leave. I mean,
Or worse, like he just superpowers them and then they beat his down.
I mean, if you want to talk about aggressive recruitment policies, Apocalypse has got a much better HR group that he works with in that aspect.
Yeah. But it's an even bigger tool.
Yeah, precisely. But Galactus is another aspect of the Marvel cosmology, and to be honest, like if you look at the mind map that we wrote for this, Ghost in chat did a great job putting this together. Like they really know their stuff about the Marvel cosmology, well beyond what I could even understand, and I'm able to pretty much recite every X-Men plot since 1986. Please help me. I don't want that knowledge in my head.
I mean, there's some bad stuff in there.
There's some bad stuff in there.
There's some painful stuff in there.
Damo's like, I'm sorry.
I mean, if I could forget House of M, I would pay to do it.
I would like to forget the entirety of 2000's X-Men Extreme Run, because that was, as a fan of Storm, that was just embarrassing to read.
Yeah, there was some high points for me, but like mostly, yeah, it was pretty terrible. What was the one with Rogue and Sage? What was that one?
That was a group with Sage. Yeah.
No. Which was it? New X-Men that had Rogue and Sage?
No, that was Extreme X-Men.
Okay.
I
really liked that. There's a great arc in that where like they're going to some alien planet to shut off some like interdimensional transport thing, and they don't have very many people. So Rogue has Sage, who has the ability to kind of like push mutants further into their mutation. And so she does it to Rogue and gives her the ability to instantly recall any power she'd ever absorbed.
Oh.
So the other people go across to stop the thing, and Rogue stops an alien invasion by herself. Because, like, I mean, she's like, now I'm the Hulk, now I'm Magneto, now I'm both, now I'm Cyclops, now I'm Professor Xavier, now I'm Phoenix. And it's just, I mean, it's gooby and way over the top, but at the same time, it's one of those things, like you're saying, that you can only see in comics. It's just, like, mind-blowing to watch her single-handedly hold off an alien invasion. And just be like, okay.
And well, since we're on Rogue and we're kind of deviating points right now, there's actually something I really love that they did within X-Men. And what they do specifically within Marvel and X-Men, if you want to talk about a good example of character growth, not just highlighting the flaws. You have Rogue, who's always been, no matter what her power set has been, because it has changed from the whole super strong flight and power absorption. Power absorption has always been at her core. There are some times where she's just been running around just absorbing powers, and that's it. That's her flaw. She can't touch anyone. She's traumatized by the fact that her powers hurt someone she loved at a very young age. She was used by her mother, Mystique, who is a major Marvel villain just even outside of the X-Men. Adopted mother, yeah. And she goes to the X-Men to redeem herself. But never truly gets past what's making her powers uncontrollable. Thank you, Professor X. There is a series that got put out called X-Men Legacy, which was Professor X basically doing a world tour, realizing, wow, I am messed up.
Man, I am really bad at my job.
Yeah. But at this point in time in Rogue's storyline, she had basically been driven to the point where even just touching someone for a second sent them into a catatonic state, and she was permanently trapped with them in her head versus the however long. So they do this story arc called I can't remember what it was called, but basically she helps Professor X with something in Australia. They resolve and bring in a new character called Danger, which was actually a living danger room. Don't ask; it's complicated and weird.
Why? Just why?
Because actually okay, real quick, the Danger Room was actually a piece of sentient technology that Professor X was aware was sentient the entire time, but never chose to free from its shackles. So then once it did get free, it came after him. Shock. But basically, between Danger and Professor X, they help Rogue resolve the trauma that caused her powers to go uncontrollable. And for a long period of time, for several years, she was able to start touching again. She had full control over her powers. And rather than put herself on the front line, she became a teacher. She worked with the school, going up to these new mutants, going, wow, your powers are a mess. Let me just touch you for a second. Okay, here's how we're going to help you. So as a good example of how Marvel writes to characters who are flawed but then also grow, Rogue is an amazing character. Just to dig into her story past like that.
I'll also note that the reason she had the super strength and flight permanently is because Mystique forced her to completely drain and almost kill, apparently, a little bit of retcon, Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers, or Ms. Marvel at the time, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And she's a big character and going to be in the movies soon, so obviously she probably won't have that connection then, but
yeah,
something for people to pay attention to.
Yeah, but as you can see from the various tangents, the Marvel Universe interconnects in so many weird, different ways that it can spiral out, and you don't see as many divisions as you do see with DC. I still love DC, but the Bat family stays in the Bat family. The Soup family stays in the Superman family. Wonder Woman doesn't really have a family. She's more just really kind of wondering.
She has Cassie and the other one.
Yeah, she has her brother. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
There's the other Wonder Girl. Too.
So, but basically, Marvel does a very good job of kind of spanning everything across again. So, definitely a very colorful universe. I'll give it that. Holy cow.
Well, I mean, I think, I don't know, DJ, do you think that's a pretty...
I think that's a
pretty good one?
I think that's a good place to wrap, actually.
I think it's a pretty good place to wrap right there is, it's big. Go read the mind map, and honestly, just my advice as a longtime comic book reader to anyone who wants to get into comic books, especially with all the renumbering going on, go into a comic book shop, find one that talks to you like a human being. If they immediately start sneering at you and acting like a jerk, walk out, find somewhere else. Trust me, it's worth it.
Or if they're trying to sell to you before you tell them what you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go in. If something looks good, pick it up. Doesn't matter if it's in the middle of the story. If you pick it up and you like that, go up to the desk and ask them, can I get the other parts of this? And they will probably tell you yes, because that means more money.
Yep.
So just go find something and read. That's my advice.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, there's other options too. If people don't want to deal with comic book stores or whatever, there's Comixology has a subscription service that, and Marvel has their own that's a little more comprehensive. And they're just a subscription service. I think they're both $10 a month, and they're it's not access to everything they've ever done, but it's access to an awful lot of their archives.
And you can
Comixology will give you more stuff, more different publishers. Marvel will give you a lot more of Marvel, so you can tailor what you want to that. But they're very good services.
And you can avoid DJ's fate and have to keep buying boxes and bags.
Well, and that's actually one of the questions I was going to ask as we kind of wrapped up is from both of you is like, what would your advice be? And so really it's go and just see what you're interested in.
I would recommend, if you're interested in Marvel, I would recommend getting their Marvel Unlimited and starting there, because you can.
Yeah.
I mean, the nice thing is that it's $10 a month, so like you can just read whatever you want, and if you don't like it, you just stop, right? Yeah. You don't feel bad. Whereas like if you bought a trade for $15, sometimes you're like, I'm going to keep reading this even though I don't really like it. But yeah, like you can just sort of just try everything, and like even if you don't like if you read some Avengers and you don't like it, just try a different era, right? Go, skip 10 years, read some more, go back 10 years, because everything changes. Particularly in Marvel, I think there's a lot of good upheaval and change.
Cool.
Agreed.
And there's always Deadpool.
Yeah, Deadpool's always.
And Gwenpool is actually pretty fun too.
God,
Gwenpool is pretty fun too. Yeah.
I can't believe they did a Gwenpool.
I did not think I would like it. I was like,
Is it good?
It is completely meta. It is so completely meta.
It is so completely meta, and it is actually very good.
I'm gonna have to.
It's not Mockingbird good. You should also read Mockingbird Blue. I swear, it's some of the best comics I've ever read. Just they actually have Howard the Duck in it. Like, she fights off a zombie. I'm not gonna spoil too much, but she fights off a zombie invasion with Howard the Duck and Miles Morales. It's fucking fantastic.
All right, so Mockingbird and Gwenpool. Got it.
Yep. And obviously Spider-Gwen.
Yeah, Spider-Gwen. I Spider-Gwen. Don't Google that. Honestly, don't Google that if you don't want to or switch your safe search filters on when you Google that.
Well, I mean, for
really?
any comic book female character.
Well, any comic book, yeah, pretty much. But no, actually, definitely go. I would definitely check out Spider-Gwen because it just started its new arc, Gwenum.
Sorry. I'm cool.
Well, no, and the thing is like it sounds campy, and it sounds like okay, yeah, whatever. It's a gender flipped version of Spider-Man. No, everything in her world is flipped. Daredevil is not a good guy. Matt Murdock is the kingpin and probably one of the worst humans who's ever lived.
Yeah.
It's an entirely new world.
He makes the Kingpin look like a cuddly bunny.
Peter Parker was the Lizard, and he is central to the whole reason why Gwen is in the situation she's in. It is not, hey, let's put Gwen in Peter's place and duplicate everything. It is an actual set of events that occurred of what if Gwen got built by the spider? Oh, everything is different now.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely a full alternate universe examination, right? Like he says. Like, it's not at all just, X changed. It's like, it's a whole twist, and, like, well thought out, too, in my opinion. In that, like, I think, like, they do a good job of making it make sense. Like, it links up, like, it tracks. Mm-hmm. It feels organic. Like,
if they can get away with Spider-Ham.
I mean, Spider-Ham's a joke and always will be kind of a joke, even when he's in normal continuity. But
oh man! All right, well let's do some shout outs real quick. DJ, what do you got for us?
Well, shout out to the Safe Gamers and Dames of Destiny, as well as the Safe Gamers Alliance, of which Focus Fire is part of it. Dames of Destiny just finished their most recent National Breast Cancer Foundation donation drive. Very successfully, might add. I don't remember what the numbers were, but it was a fun time. And thank you, Green, for being part of that. That was a great segment. Even if we were all loopy by the end of it.
I don't think there would be a way to get through, like, wasn't it like the full weekend?
Oh God, it was.
I mean,
so many hours of
those multi-day streams are just, and you guys took breaks too, didn't you? It wasn't 24 hours.
It was like 12-hour blocks, 12 hours each day, but it was intense. It was pretty fast. But yes, shout out to them and the Alliance. You can definitely check us out along with Omnic Labs, who is part of the Alliance if you are more of an Overwatch fan too. So,
all right, and how about you, Damo?
Shout out to Focus Fire for bringing us all together, and shout out to one of my favorite comic book shops here in Seattle, Dream Strands. Don't know if anybody there listens to this, but
nice. Shout out to Golden Age Collectibles. There we are. Thank you.
There you go. Another good one.
Also in Seattle. Yay!
Beard, what about you? What shout outs you got?
Just continued shout outs towards Guardian Con and everything, since that's going to be coming up here soon. Don't forget to get your tickets, of course. Everything pretty well supports St. Jude, minus the ticket costs. Donations have started already. Plenty of other places are also starting to take donations for St. Jude because, 'tis the season and all that. And great, it's wonderful November already. Being in retail. Anyway, the only other big thing then is just continued shout outs to anybody that is running with the cancer donations as well. Both St. Jude and St. Jude has done a number of things for my family. The cancer has also been a huge part, unfortunately, of my family as well. So, continued thanks to any and all that do support those.
Perfect. And real quick, next topic, like we said at the top of the episode, next topic is going to be Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. I really encourage people, even if you don't have a PlayStation like myself, they have there's a number of people on YouTube who have actually patched together the cutscenes and the parts of gameplay that further explain the story of this game. This is one of the few games that I will really honestly encourage someone to just sit down and watch that. Most of the time, I'll be honest, it's really difficult to watch just cutscenes because it's somewhat disjointed. This one, there's a little bit disjointed between the cutscenes just because you're jumping from gameplay to cutscene and you don't have that gameplay all the time in between. But the story is just it's just amazing. And if you're not already in the Discord chat, please jump in there. We're talking about it. This is a very heavy topic because part of the point of Hellblade was dealing with the mental illness aspect of the character and also how that impacts what the character is going through, and also really to encourage the discussion of what that does. So that's going to be pretty integral to the entire chat. When it already is. And so, but yeah, I cannot suggest more strongly that to just watch it. I'll try to. Yeah, Pin's got me a link in chat right now, so I'll put a link to that in our show notes just to make sure everyone gets a chance to that. So, but definitely, if you have any thoughts, questions, and you're not in our Discord, or if you want us to read them as part of a dispatch on the episode next month, please be sure to send that in. Other than that,
holiday sales are coming up here soon too, so keep your eyes on that. They do have a PC version of Senua as well.
Oh, do they really? Okay, cool.
Yeah, it is up on PC because I was looking at that first, thinking I would much rather play it on the PC and maybe stream it sometime. But no, long story short, they have it there, and I know Steam will probably start their holiday sales soon.
Oh, that's right.
And it might be on there.
Lock down your wallets because it's gonna.
It's gonna hurt.
I'm betting
Yeah.
I'm betting it won't be in the first round because it's still relatively new.
It's a pretty new one. But oh my god,
it is on Steam. It is on Steam.
But I meant it won't be in the first sale.
Yeah, no, I can imagine because it's only been out for a month or two, hasn't it?
Couple months.
To be fair, I kind of said that about several games, and actually, I'll just pull one rabbit out of my hat. Nier Automata was actually one of them that I didn't think was going to go on sale too quickly. The version was put on sale very quickly on Steam. I think it was only like 2 months later, and they had it like 25% off. So we're in an age now that things are coming down. Plus, it's also an indie dev, so there might be a little bit more possibility. Anyway, sorry, Demo.
Was it like a 13-man team on that one? It was like just 13 people that did that game, I think. Was it 13 or 30? Small. I can't remember.
It's very small. What I was going to say is, I'm not saying it won't, but I'm just trying to
Mhm.
say people should maybe not get their hopes up too much.
But
yeah,
regardless, if you watch the cutscenes, you can get a really good feel for.
Yeah.
And I mean, just the cutscenes. We were talking about this again before stream, but like just the cutscenes, it was one of the ones that I had my eye on because it was they were very transparent about it being about mental illness. So I was really interested in it, and I started watching this collection of cutscenes, I did not realize, like, I just watched the entire thing in one sitting. Like, it was amazing. I have not really ever had that happen with just cutscene videos, so really excited to see what we get to talk about. But yeah. All right, so let's run through the outro. We'll stick around for a little bit of an after show and then get out of here. With that, we'll begin to wrap the chat up. Thank you again to those over on Twitch for coming to spend your evening with us. If you'd like to join us for the live streaming of the episodes, please be sure to give us a follow over on twitch.tv/FocusedFireChat. Links to all our other sites can also be found with our episode archives over on thenewfocusedfirechat.com. Thank you again, DJ and Damo, for jumping into the chat. We really appreciate having you both, and I will be sure to get your contact information links posted up with our show notes for anyone who wants to continue chatting with either of you. Please be sure to email us at focusedfirechat@gmail.com with any feedback or questions for our team concerning the podcast, and let us know how we're doing by giving us some feedback over on iTunes. Reminder that we do try to stream a recap of the month-long Extra Lore conversations on the first Wednesday of each month. But if we have any variations, we always make sure to let everyone know through our Twitter account at FocusFireChat. Also, be sure to check out all our amazing podcast partners within the Guardian Radio Network over on theguardiansofdestiny.com. So until next time, focus your fire, and may your light shine bright.